Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with Julia and we talked about growing up with Glorantha. A lot of people's first exposure to fantasy worlds comes from somebody like Tolkien, but Julia's first fantasy world was Greg Stafford's Glorantha, and she learnt about it as a child. Julia talks a lot about how that influenced her and how it influenced her perception of role-playing games and other fantasy universes in general. I'm going to jump across to that interview in just a moment, but first, remember to subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel. It helps us out, and it lets us make more videos like this. Thanks.
Well, it is different. It's difficult to talk about this just because that's the thing I know. So I've got no, I can't really, I mean, it would be interesting for me to write an account and hear an account for somebody who grew up with their parents playing in a different system all their lives and how it worked out for them. I mean, it has sort of, basically meant that the BRP system, which is a foundation of the vast majority of Chaosium's games, has sort of become all my life. There has sort of been the system, regardless of what you wanted to play. Even if it was like somebody else's fantasy world, you'd played with that system. So basically, RuneQuest, the sort of the RuneQuest type system, has been the first one I've known. Apart from, when I was very small, I got my first percentile dice, and my dad wrote up how you roll out various stats, and I was just sitting there, out of the way while my parents were gaming and sort of just rolling up random characters, from basically the time I was sort of able to, tell numbers. And that's just sort of, having basically this percentile system ingrained as you as, oh, this is a really good way of showing how good somebody is at some skill, because everybody can understand the concept of, I've got 100% in this, because, say you've got 100% in this, you're probably really good at what you're doing. And it's sort of very nicely graspable, even like if you're young, when, some other number may not make a sense. You say like, okay, I'm on a scale of how many to how many, where do I fall on this? So that was sort of on the rule system way. In the Glorantha world way, I am actually in this strange position that I was always hearing people talk about Glorantha, but it was not something that people generally went around and explained to, a 5-year-old. They were just doing that stuff. They were living in it. I was seeing these people at these free forms, having sort of, blue paint on their faces, runes all over their faces. A big thing at the time was, this was before, the Sartorites look quite that as they look in the books now, how before they were interpreted that way. So people were basically trying to sort of fashion a kilt out of bed sheets and putting blue paint on themselves to play in these games. Now I grew up around that. I grew up around people sort of experiencing the world in that way. Which I suppose is different as if you'd grow up around people actually doing your LARP. You've got these fantasy armor, you've got the weaponry. And here there were people who were, they didn't really usually have the outfits to get across what was maybe in their minds about their characters. They had to make do with what they had, but they really sort of, they made that work. They made all of this work, the paint and, what costuming they could get, even if it was something rather silly, they made that work. And just like children might sort of make their own things out of cardboard. They, make a crown out of cardboard, sword out of cardboard. It was kind of that level. And I think because it was sort of, it really showed the love that people were having for this world. And because nobody explained it to me, and bearing in mind I was very young at the time, I didn't quite grasp the concept in the beginning of Glorantha not being a real place. It's difficult to understand, I have to point out, when you're 3 years old, that there's people drawing maps and talking about these places to that extent, knowing so much about the history and geography of a place, you seeing depictions of these animals that in a way, that is not real. The same like I see something on TV and then as a kid at some point realize, hang on, no, that was not the news, that was a TV program. This was, made for entertainment value. So I kind of, very young age, I was kind of there. I went to conventions and, quite often at the time, Greg Stafford used to be there. I mean, somebody explained to me he made Glorantha, and I was like, how does a man make a world? It was like, how are people playing this? I completely blew my mind. I didn't understand any of it. So yeah, that's kind of part of the perspective. You end up, feeling about these things in a different way. And I mean, that's on the Glorantha level. I was also on the Cthulhu level. I was going to these convention people as well, also playing Cthulhu Freeform. I remember one time I was at a convention in Germany. I was about 5 years old, and a bunch of people in dark robes came around who were playing cultists in some game. And they came around and said, human sacrifice. I sort of wanted to grab me, and some adult saw me and said, like, oh shit, I gotta freak out the kid. And I was like, nah, that's cool. I know they are just playing, sacrificing me. That's fine. It's good by me. But yeah, depending on how you grew up and stuff like that, if you got a bunch of, young adult or fairly young adults at the time in robes, sort of, making a grab for you, you might freak. But at that point, I was kind of desensitized to all of that.